Hello, everybody, and welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Flynn, and I'm very happy to be hosting today. And I'm joined once again by our essentially resident illustrator, I would say, here at Adobe Asia Pacific, illustrator and artist Jeremy Lord. Hello, Jeremy. How are you? I'm good. Yeah, we have a great time. I know you've got a lot in store for us today, which is super cool. We're kind of back to regular scheduled program, semi-regular. As we end out the year, we've actually only got a couple of live streams until we're wrapping up. The only break we really take throughout the year is over the Christmas holiday. Here in Australia, for sure, basically everyone just clocks out for a month. I know it's a bit different in the US and other places. We're very fortunate that we can do it, but you can't get an email back. Everyone just takes the time off. Everyone goes on holidays. Anyone with kids, you can't hear from them for 6 weeks as well. So we're kind of gearing up for that. Trying out some new stuff for next year, playing with our formats and kind of thinking about our schedule and content based on all the different stuff that's happened this year and what we anticipate happening next year and the sort of content we want to do as well. So we're playing around a lot with that sort of thing. So yeah, winding down the year, there's been so much. And Jeremy, I know we're going to get into it really quick, but the last thing we did was Max, and we were kind of reflecting on the year. There's been a lot of new tools, like new tweaks and changes. And I think you came up with a whole bunch of different ideas for the next two streams we're going to cover today and tomorrow. And I know we almost did kind of like a what's changed in illustration, what's changed in workflow. And I'm really excited where we've landed. But any thoughts on kind of all that, like on the year that's been? This is our quick little 30-second recap video.
These two streams are going to be about mostly is like what's kind of new out there, or what are some of the, maybe not necessarily like completely new, but recently new and definitely new to my workflow, which is great, I think, to see. It's a little bit kind of like nudging me out of my comfort zone, but for good reasons, in the sense that like what we're going to go through today with Firefly is pretty exciting, I think, to me in terms of like the collaboration process with a client and the briefing process with a client. So yeah, I can't wait to get into that. But yeah, look, overall, super excited about what's coming. Talking about that with some of my students as well, about kind of like generative upscale, all those kinds of things, and what it means for finished art. Yeah, it kind of hard to say, like, for sure, because there's just so much stuff going on. Like,
yeah,
say something now and like next week it's just kind of like irrelevant again because it's moving so fast.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. I mean, and that's when we're kind of in the thick of it as well. People that aren't as like locked in and kind of reading all the stuff and know people and, super into it. You can kind of blink and then look again and go, oh, there's all these tools. What do I use? What do I invest my time in? All that sort of stuff. But anyway, hopefully we're going to help you guys out here a little bit today because Jeremy's kind of done a bit of that work, and we're going to be exploring Firefly Boards. I'll let you take that away. We've touched on it a couple of times on Adobe Live. I really like this tool for ideating, and had a couple of different people pop in. I'm super curious to how Jeremy might use it in his workflow. We've done lots of streams kind of on inspiration and kind of trying to help out at the ideation stage before you kind of head down kind of crafting. So yeah, super interested to hear all about it, Jeremy. And I can share your screen. Let's make sure I share the one that's the right way up instead of tomorrow's screen. But yeah, there we go. All right, so we can see these boards. Take it away. I'll put some music on.
Yeah. So this is Firefly Boards. If we're kind of navigating, this is all online. If we navigate to Firefly, you'll see basically it'll take us straight to this landing page, and we can start getting into creating a board. So we can click here. We got a bunch of different options in here. Obviously, we can make videos, edit images, but we're looking at this idea of creating a board, which I've already done. When you click on this, it just opens up a blank board and brings up this idea of like, cool, drag and drop in some images from wherever. Basically, you're starting this. The core idea behind this, I think, is that it is a mood board, right? It's a mood board builder, inspiration board. Think, I guess, yeah, like Pinterest board or any of those kind of other things that you've got, just all within Adobe. And something that will come up quite a bit on this stream actually is all above board in terms of credential and image rights, which is really great to see. So this is where we're at. We can drag and drop in a bunch of images if we want. So let's go up and open our Finder. So I've got a bunch of images that I've found online, which I technically don't necessarily have the rights to, but this is how you would kind of build a mood board. If, as long as I'm not using them, strictly speaking, in my artwork, we should be fine in terms of like, getting ideas, getting inspiration. That's what those things are for. So what's really cool about this is I can just grab all of these images and then just kind of drag them into Firefly. And it should, oh, sorry. That
I just
has
threw it in
opened
as a
up
new
all my
page.
images in my browser. That's not the way to do it. Sorry about that. I should drag and drop them into this little window. There we go. That's the way to do it.
Nice.
So it's really cool. So this, even just this little feature, which was previewed a little bit at Adobe Max this year, I was just like, oh my God, this is like fantastic, because it's just ordering these images for me, and no longer do I have to kind of like shuffle them around. We've got a bunch of different options here where I can tile these kind of separately. I can control the space equally across these. Obviously, these images are like movable individually, but if I decide like, all right, I need to batch these into like, let's get the gingerbread man all over here. And let's get the more kind of like zombie references all through here. So that's zombie reference, that's zombie reference, there's that. And then we've got some kind of like style references. So I can clump these together. And if I just select them all and just, I've got a bunch of arrange options up here. If I just click on that button, it will just tile them in a really nice and neat way for me. And then I can just move these around in blocks. So that's a really nice way to start with, of kind of ordering things for my client and saying, all right, I'm going to do a gingerbread man, and it's kind of going to be in this style. That's a good kind of starting point once you've gotten a brief for
Yeah.
a client. And what we're doing, actually, I should probably mention this as well. What we're going to be doing over the next 2 streams is we're going to make a kind of like a horror vibe Christmas tee, right? So we're going to make a Christmas t-shirt, print for a t-shirt, and we're going to make a kind of Christmassy kind of vibe. So I got a gingerbread man, and I got a bunch of zombie stuff, and that's the kind of the beginning of this brief. But this in and of itself is like super good to just use, even if you're just using it as a mood board builder that you can then share with your client. Is a really nice kind of way to start. So let me close this and go back to my mood board right here. I've added in these 2 images down here. And by the way, this mood board is like welcome to infinite kind of scrolling.
Yeah.
You can go as far as you want. There's so much space in this mood board, and you can resize and re-edit, and kind of use this as you need. So it's really kind of quite a powerful kind of board to just put all your artwork onto, right? These 2 images are brought straight in from Firefly. So I've gone into Firefly, regular Firefly, like image creating Firefly, not the Firefly boards. And I've made a few kind of references of zombies, or like inspiration of zombies, and I quite like these. So all I did here was just click on the share button at the bottom, and I just said copy image. I've gone back to my mood board and just hit Command V, and it's placing that image in there.
And as you're popping that in, just a question from Dark Hours in chat, says, are you able to determine which image is the largest in size in a group?
In terms of like dimensions, to kind of reorder it a little bit?
I guess so, yeah, maybe because it was scaling up and down.
So I'm not, that's a good question. I'm not sure in terms of like resolution what it's doing. Obviously, like these are all raster images, so if I start zooming in on some, they'll get a little bit kind of like pixelation loss.
Yeah.
And if I make them really, really, really big, it might be the same. I'm not sure what it's actually doing in terms of storage and like where it's saving that data and all this. Obviously, all of this is being saved to Creative Cloud. But yeah, in terms of resolution, I'm not sure if that's what Dark Hours is asking, but it's not necessarily super clear to me yet as to like what it's doing there and kind of how big the image resolution gets. But you can always rescale these images. You can rotate them. You can do a bunch of different things in here. If you want to kind of, bring more attention to them in your board, you can kind of do that a little bit as you need. So you can always just kind of reorder these and see kind of what happens with that.
It definitely seems lossless to me. Like I feel like I've scaled things down quite small and then later
Yeah.
on scaled things back up, and it's been the original. So I feel like whatever you upload it as, it's retaining that information. I feel like it's pretty crazy how well it's dealing with storage.
Yeah, so I think, and we'll touch upon that once we get into kind of editing images back and forth from Photoshop into this towards the end of the stream. But because all of these assets are online, it's obviously just taking the source code from there. So it's just uploading the image as to whatever you've done, and then you can rescale it, but it will always stay at that resolution because it's getting its data from that image, I assume. But yeah, so I can then kind of group all these images together. So a lot of the shortcuts actually that exist in Photoshop, Illustrator, all those kind of things will exist here as well. So let's say that I really like this image. If I hit Command D, it'll duplicate that image for me. So I'll make a copy of it that I can then kind of play around with a little bit, right? So I can also take all of these images, Command G, and they will group them. So I now don't have to select all of them. I can just click on one and move them around as a group, rescale them all together. There's a bunch of different shortcuts again that will kind of carry over when you go from one kind of image to the next in here. So that's kind of like first intro into this. This is probably like when I first saw this, I was like, great, mood board. But there's actually a fair bit more to Firefly boards than just kind of making a mood board. So the second kind of part of this, which I think is definitely something that I will start to include into the process working with clients, is this kind of collaborative process aspect of this, right? So in this instance, I've shared this board with you, Flynn. You can see up here, I can share the board, I can send a link to it, or I can add somebody in the group. If you have their email address, you just send them the link. And Flynn can then see this, but he can also edit it, right? So you can kind of mess around with this and go like, I really like this. And we've got a bunch of tools in here that will allow us to do this in a really kind of nice way. So you can see here on my screen, I don't know if it's updating live, Flynn's about to ruin this whole board for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna mess this up. So I can just duplicate and it duplicates live on your screen, which is pretty cool.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, like, you know, this actually kind of cuts out a fair bit of like, I guess, back and forth with a client, where normally I'd have to kind of like send this in an email, type out an email, wait for them to read it. Whereas this is a little bit more kind of live collaborative. And it's almost kind of like back in the days where I would go into a studio or an agency and have the art director there with me, kind of, I guess, looking over my shoulder to not to put it a little bit kind of badly, but it, you know, that some designers kind of get iffy a little bit with that, but I always find it's so much faster and more efficient if you can be like, cool, yeah, now make it blue. Okay, now make that bigger. Now get rid of the bat. Whereas normally you'd have to kind of like send those changes over, wait for the person to see it, type out. It's a lot of extra kind of messing around with that gets cut out by doing something like this and just sharing this board with the client. So you can see Flynn has added an image in there. I can also bring up a text tool. So I've got the selection tool that's just kind of messing around and allowing me to make edits to different images and select those. But this text tool is actually really awesome too. So let's say like, all right, cool, I really like this. Or like, let's say Flynn really likes this, and he can go like, cool, remove the batch.
Yeah.
So then that's just kind of added that to this note, right? So it's literally just kind of like putting a note on that image. I like this. We've got a bunch of different shapes as well that we can use. So we've got a cool arrow tool that we can do, right? So I can add in an arrow here. Let's make this red, and let's make the stroke width a little bit bigger so we can actually see it. And there we go, right? So we can actually point things to that. And that will allow your client potentially to go like, cool, I like this, I like that from here, put a circle around something, I like this iteration, rather than going, you know, this old thing of like, oh, like third image down from the right and then one down from that. Like that can be quite complicated, obviously, to do that. So yeah, so this is really nice to be able to kind of do all of this. And then, in his own time, your client could come in and make edits and like add nodes to this. And then the next day I come in and kind of mess around with that. So Flyn's gone in and kind of made some variations of that.
I
Right?
just thought
So
I'd
this
do
is
something
really
just to
cool.
see how it worked like live, like compared. And
Yeah.
like a really annoying creative director, I'm just like, well, just let me do it. And so
So, and look, like, I guess it's an interesting kind of point to make because then it's just like, all right, well, are you just kind of giving too much control over to your art director? And like, I guess in a sense, if your client doesn't necessarily know what they want, this could kind of open up a little bit of Pandora's box, and there's just like too many options now, and it's a little bit kind of lacking art direction. So that can be a bit of an issue. Sorry. But that's also the case regardless of what you're working like through, if you're working in this or if you're working, in any kind of like more traditional tools.
yeah,
If your client doesn't know what they want, they're going to start being a little bit painful with this sort of like making edits, making changes. What I think this actually does is it allows the client potentially, this is going to sound a little bit mean, but usually the stereotype with sort of, you know, commissioners or clients not necessarily knowing what they want and doing this thing of like, I'll know it when I see it kind of thing. Previously, you would have to kind of like, all right, fine, let me just do this really quickly for you, just so you can see how bad your idea is and how much that is not working.
mm,
But that's actually work for you to do, right? Like that's you got to go and like mock up that idea a little bit. And so there's a minimal amount of work involved in that just to kind of show the client that that wasn't necessary, which is a little bit of a pain in the butt. Um, with this sort of stuff, you can actually do that a little bit more quickly, right? So yeah, so like Flynn has now kind of done this where they're all skeletons instead of zombies. So like that's cool, right? So normally I would have had to kind of redraw this image even just as a sketch to show the client like, all right, what does it look like if it's a skeleton? Can we
mm.
add in more stuff in there? So it's actually, I think, a cool like ideation tool for that, for your client to kind of get a little bit more acquainted with what's about to happen when they hit go and let's finalize this image, right?
Mm.
And so what Flynn has done here is exactly that. So we're going to take any of these images. Let's take just this one. I'm going to duplicate that one over. I don't really need to duplicate it, but we might kind of do some things in here. And I can start looking at the contextual bar that has popped up here when I click on that image, right? So select an image, you get this contextual bar that appears up there. So we've got vary, edit, convert, upscale, so we can upscale the res, remove background. In this case, it might be a little bit tricky, but we can give it a shot. Crop, download, and then we've got a bunch of different options up here as well, or with according kind of corresponding shortcuts to that. We'll talk about those in a little while, but let's go through these in order. So I'm going to hit vary, and I've got a bunch of different things in here. I've got more like this. That's pretty simple, straightforward. I just like, yeah, just show me more stuff like this image. I've got keep style, which will keep the style, and then keep subject, which will keep the subject and kind of riff on the style a little bit, right? For the sake of kind of clarity, I'm just going to hit more like this, and it's going to load up this kind of like 4x4, 16 image kind of thing. And then I can just click anywhere where I want to place this. So I'm going to place there, and it's going to generate more images like this. So content, style, color, and just kind of mess around with compositions a little bit. And we'll see, like, I assume that's what you did down here.
That's exactly what I did. Yeah, down the bottom. So
Yeah.
I didn't even put anything in. So I did exactly what you did. So it'd be interesting to see what the results are. But yeah, I didn't put anything in the prompt at the beginning. I just wanted to see what it would come up with completely by itself.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and look, we're probably going to get some variations happening in there, which like it can be good, can be
Yeah.
bad, depending on what you're kind of looking for. But what I think is the key here for me, at least personally, is this isn't so much just kind of like feeding me things to do. It's more like, oh, it's actually I kind of like the moon behind him, like it kind of does a halo. Or
Mm,
it'd be nice if there was like, you know, underlit like this, like kind of
yeah.
lit from beneath, where there's kind of like some mystical power coming from the grave or something. Like it can give you nice ideas of like, oh, that's cool. I'll incorporate that into my artwork. So it's a really nice, quick way to get these sorts of ideas flowing really quickly, I think. And then obviously we can just kind of take this one and then we go, all right, we don't need all of these. Let's just keep that one and we're good to go.
Yeah,
Right?
totally.
So that's Vary. On any of these images as well, this one doesn't have it because I've stuck it in there our um, from this Firefly here. So the prompt exists here. But you'll notice on some of these, you can load the prompt and it will tell you a ghastly zombie, blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of made this prompt for me
Yeah.
from that image, which is kind of cool. But I can also just kind of generate an image on my own with the button down here. So I can just say generate an image. I'm going to get rid of this style and composition, and I'm going to say giant gingerbread man, because that's what I'm going to be doing. Um, stomping over city. Fires and smoke in the background. Cool. And we're going to use Firefly image 4 for this. So a little word on that. I'm going to hit generate, just let it do its thing while we kind of talk about these models. And Flynn, you might want to jump in here as well, because I think you know a little bit more about this than I do. But all of the Firefly models you'll see up here. I don't know if I can zoom in on this at all. No, it doesn't look like I can, unfortunately. Just under the Adobe models, you've got a little thing on that says commercially safe. This means that all these models are commercially safe to use in this mood board. You could use them in a client presentation, all good to go, all the credentials are there. All these other models, if I go in, I'm going to just take one of these images over here. Let's take this one and just drop it in. So we've just generated an image in there. If I go in and select one of the images that I've created, for instance, with Google. Yeah, so this one's with Nano Banana. So the difference is here I've got a message saying I'm responsible for these. We're not sure what the credentials are. On the Firefly one, tick of approval, commercially safe.
Yeah, exactly right. So I guess I'll jump in there just in terms of, my understanding of it. And I think everyone, it depends where you are. There's things happening right now in different countries, probably in the States, different states, right? Like there's certain different laws around things. But in general terms, like the Firefly LLM is built on Adobe stock, and it's commercially safe. And so it's been designed to be that way because it's designed for creative professionals to use. Within here, and also I believe within Photoshop at the moment, there are access to other models that do not fall under that kind of protection or that kind of standards. And so personally for me as a creative professional, I will be using Firefly. If I was using the tools, I will be... Mood boarding is very different because I feel very comfortable that I could put lots of things in a mood board. It's just to get an idea across. It's not necessarily commercially, a thing. But within my craft, I would be using Firefly very safely and feel that that's very safe. Also video. But anything else, because it doesn't fall under that jurisdiction, I wouldn't use it as part of like my sort of the craft-based or production side of my creative process. Or I certainly wouldn't want there to be anything that could be kind of traced back to like, well, that was used, you did barely anything except for use this model and then press print or press send. I'd want to be doing a lot more of the crafting side of things personally. And mileage may vary as well. So everyone has to kind of read up on that stuff and just kind of think about how, I mean, I joke about it a little bit just because, I think that it's always been this way with copyright. Like copyright has always been very broad just in terms of how much is inspiration, how much is copyright, how much have you done, how much of it is yours, and how much of it is someone else's. So it's just easy to do now, I would say, is probably the biggest change. But it's something that creative professionals should we all need to be very aware of. And I think most of the time it's a gut feel as well. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, because you're far more in that field than I am. But, there used to be a thing where it's like, well, if you just flip the image upside down, it's 50-50, right? You've changed half of it. And it's obviously that's rubbish. And if you trace something like, well, I did it by hand. It's like, yeah, but you traced it. So, it's really, in Australia, we have a thing called the pub test. And I think that applies really well here. The pub test is, okay, yes, it might be technically proficient, but if you're sitting having a beer with a bunch of other people and you say, hey, well, technically this is right, everyone in the pub's going to say, yeah, righto, mate. But you're wrong. That's not, when you're sitting down and actually having a chat about it, it doesn't feel right. It's just a different word for a gut check. So, that's all I have to say on the matter currently at the end of 2025. Let's see how we go next year.
Let's see next week.
Tune in next week.
And that's exactly right. And the main reason I'm bringing this up is obviously the big sort of like ghost hanging over all kind of AI things in illustration is like, oh, usage rights, blah, 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 credentials, credit to the image, the artist. And I think all kudos to Adobe for doing it this way and building it this way, because it's far more kind of clean and does pass the pub test, to use your analogy as well. It's just a little bit more kind of like, yep, cool, this is commercially safe. We've got credentials for it. So we're all good to go. But as you said as well, like as part of a mood board, we're good, right? Like none of this is necessarily going to make it as the final product into that final image that we're going to create. This is all just kind of process and ideation at the moment. So kind of use whatever you kind of feel like doing. Just be aware of those if you are going to go further with those, if you're going to use those to build a brand or an illustration or whatever. Be aware of the credentials behind these images when you're using AI in a model like this. But all right, enough of that. Let's talk about some more cool features that we've got in here. So we talked about text, we talked about the image tool, of the kind of the shapes tool over here. We've also got this linked to Adobe stock. So I can actually go in and say, I want an image of a gingerbread man, and show me those. So that's going to go into Adobe stock and bring in some images. So again, all of these are like credentials are all good. We're good to roll on these. These are all coming from Adobe stock, right? So some of the other features that we can kind of have with this, we've got remove. So we've kind of covered a little bit of remove. So let's go back into this one. And I'm going to say edit, remove, and I'm going to select an area in here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can kind of see what I'm doing a little bit more. I've got this blue kind of like rough selection tool, and I'm going to say remove that, and it's going to generate a bunch of images from that with the bat kind of gone, or I could bring it back in if I wanted to. Yeah. So that bat was actually originally kind of brought in just as a kind of add in there or insert tool. So there we go. It's kind of gotten rid of that. Keep that one, cool. Or I can kind of bring it back and say insert and put a bat back in here and just say bat.
Bat. I hope you get a cricket
and
bat.
then just like literally just
or a baseball
like pop
bat
the
or
thing
something.
back in there. So we can kind of add and kind of edit these images a little bit. Again, working with your client to go like, I like this, but it's not quite lively enough. Let's see some bats. Oh, all right.
Didn't like the bat.
We've hit a little bit of a snag here. So this, I'm not too sure what the kind of the areas are here. I've done a little bit of digging into this, just to kind of see why it would be doing this. And I'll talk about this a little bit further with some of these kind of this particular tool here with the 3D. There seems to be something where sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Why that is, I'm not too sure. Whether it's an image that's not got the rights to it, that's not got the credentials for it. The Adobe user guidelines say no famous people, no recognizable art styles, so no like Studio Ghibli, no anime things. Nothing that's going to technically rip another artist's work or a famous person's face or anything like that, which is great, right? In terms of like legal, fantastic. You're really kind of covering all the bases there. But it seems to be a little bit kind of sometimes hit and miss, right? So One of the really cool things that we can do with this kind of like skeleton gingerbread man that I have just taken from Google Images, right? So this is not a generated image. This is somebody's photographic work. I can put it into my mood board, but obviously credential-wise, I wouldn't be able to use this in any kind of commercial process. But one of the really cool features is I can take this and I can either convert this image to a video or make this image 3D. So this is one of the really cool things that we saw at Adobe Max this year, where all these flat JPEGs are now turned like creatable as 3D content, which is amazing for obviously for photo editing and stuff. But for me as an illustrator, that's like, whoa, it's like the turntable feature that's come out kind of relatively recently for Adobe Illustrator, where now you can use this as kind of like reference and kind of change the angle on certain poses. So I'm going to change this to 3D, and it's going to give me this kind of things like, what image do you want to change to 3D? I'm going to click on that image. It doesn't have to encompass the whole frame, by the way. It's just like it's going from that file, and it's going to have a little bit of a think. And this one should work. It's worked in the past. There we go. So it's giving me a 3D kind of version of that image, and it's rotatable. So I can rotate that.
Yeah, it's pretty
up
wild.
And down. So it's pretty crazy. And then I can technically, so this is where it's a little bit funny. Again, the inner workings of this, I'm not too sure about, because this one, it should actually just rotate it in 3D, but this is just rotating the image kind of like this way. But I've done it to this image. So this image is literally just that one here. If I load the prompt, you can see I've gone change camera angle to top down one.
Yeah.
So I've taken this image and I've just gone into here, gone edit, and edit with any of these engines. In this case, I used Google's engine. And then with that, I've just typed in that prompt, right? And it's giving me this image. So it's a little bit more kind of like top down camera angle. And then I've done the same thing to this, and I've said convert to 3D. And this is the result that it's giving me. But this one is actually rotating around the back of it. So I'm not too sure what's in that image that means that this one can't do it and this one can.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And then same thing here. If I do this to this one, you'll see it's done this every single time. And of course, now because we're live, it will not do this.
Yeah.
Probably. But this one fails. See, there we go. All right. Image reference violates Adobe's user guidelines. So again, I'm not too sure what it is about this one, because all I've done to this is I've gone into edit, remove, and I've just removed the extra pieces of gingerbread man that were kind of hanging around the frame. So why is the first one okay for 3D, but not the second one? A bit of a mystery there.
Yeah.
But this feature is super cool because, again, it will allow me to kind of get a little bit of like a reference angle on that gingerbread man, right? So I'm looking at this kind of like Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, or this kind of like really kind of like, you know, Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters scene, or the giant gingerbread man from Shrek. I want this kind of like, you know, bottom up kind of angle, make him seem really, really big. So this might help me with that kind of reference of like turning that image into 3D. Something else that's super cool for that, and that can be used for reference, is this image down here that I've just taken this Air Force One shoe, just again from Google Images, and I've converted it to 3D. And look at that, it's done a pretty good job reproducing that shoe in 3D. So this is great for just kind of like, it's not quite getting the right angle. I can just kind of change that a little bit. Now, I want to be careful with this because it's like, this isn't anatomical reference, right? This is still an AI generated image. It's doing some funny things with it. You can see that it's done this little kind of buckle here. It's done two of them because it doesn't know what's on the other side. So it's not necessarily like accurate representation of real life, but it's pretty good just to go like, you know, I'm really struggling to draw this shoe from this kind of like 3/4 top down angle. This might help me kind of get that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, this happens all the time, right? Like, especially with hands and feet and posing. And I know you and other illustrators, you know, I know wasn't there a Disney illustrator who just had a mirror, or there might have been lots of them who had a mirror just next to their pad, like where they're drawing and everything, because every now and then they'd try to make expressions and things like that. And obviously that's still an awesome way to draw if you're drawing by hand and or even digitally. But it is interesting with the poses, like I'd trying to remember who it was, but it might have been Dale Bagini, like would often have lots of knickknacks and the shoes and the hand.
Yep.
And so often he would try to just put the hand in the pose that he would like and then draw it. And I know you've done that as well. We've done streams talking about posing and things like that. It's quite interesting that you could do that with something very specific, or maybe your client has given you some of their jackets and like, can you put these jackets on some characters and then put these characters so we can do some wall artwork? And it could really help with like how the fabric would sit on a particular character and things like that. It's quite a lot of possibilities there, I think, which are cool.
Yeah, it was one of the things that really blew me away at Adobe Max this time around, was just like I saw that and instantly thought like, oh man, references, 3D models, fantastic, really cool. Again, with a pinch of salt, because it, like, you know, how does it know exactly what a hand looks like from a different angle? It's never going to be necessarily as like anatomically accurate as actually just taking that photo yourself or looking at a hand reference there, but it'll do in a pinch.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's pretty cool. The next thing I wanted to kind of showcase is this, right? So what I've done here is I've gone into this image in the edit menus. I won't go back. I'll show you this in a sec because it takes a little while to kind of identify this. But in that edit menu, there is an edit type in image option that I'll pop back into it once I'm done here. But what it's done is it's basically finding all of what it thinks is type and lettering in that image, right? So this is one of my artworks. And it's pretty good because you can see that it's finding my artwork, my signature down at the bottom, like hand scripted. It's not a font. Even this kind of Japanese kanji. And interestingly, I love this, but one of the little kind of water droplets that's happening on this kind of splash, it thinks it's an O. So it's kind of like, oh, that's type. I recognize that.
Where's
so
the
it's
splash?
Kind of
I can't
highlighted
see
with
it.
this blue kind of dashed line, all the areas in this image that have type.
Oh,
so
I see.
It's quite kind of funny how it does that. But I'll show you basically what you can do here is you can click on this and say, all right, I want, instead of saying menu, I wanted to say hello, and then I can just generate that, right? So I've done this example over here. Let me just, oops, there we go. So it takes a little second to do this, and it doesn't look like I can get out of here just yet. There we go. So you can see over here that image next to it is gone in and edited it. So I've changed the GO up here to TY. I've changed that. I've changed the hashtag, the mention in Instagram. So it's doing its best to kind of match the font style as well, which is pretty awesome. What the applications of that are probably not huge in terms of what I'm doing here today, which is kind of showcasing the process of that. But yeah, it's still kind of like a nice little kind of tool to have. So you can see it's still kind of having a little bit of thing. This is a flat image, by the way. This is a flat JPEG. So it's not finding any kind of type source in there being like, oh yeah, easy. I can tell what all the data is of the type in there.
Yeah.
And it looks like it's not particularly happy with me right now. So let me just undo that. Right. It's stuck. No, of course. This happens when we're live. Oh man.
Just maybe refresh the whole page.
Yeah, I might do that. Yep.
Yeah. It'll be back in a sec. Yeah, there's a lot on there, and I know that you can put video stuff on here as well. So it doesn't like I don't think it's like an overload.
I've done a little kind of test up here as well. So on this, you can see here, this is what I was talking about. Edit text and image. That's what I kind of did just now. Right. But I can also convert to 3D. I can convert an image to a video. Right. So this is pretty cool because what it does is it allows you, let's say I'm going to click on this, it'll select your first frame, and then last frame I can say I want it to be this one. Right. And then I'm going to hit generate. And what it's going to do is basically it's going to do this one. If I zoom in on this and hit play, you'll see it just kind of does a morph in between the two. But then it just kind of makes this one like steam and bubble. Like it's quite like, again, it's kind of fun. It might unlock an idea, it might not. It's a little bit kind of just like a bit silly and a bit fun, but it's pretty cool. But just to wrap up what we're kind of doing here, obviously we've got all the kind of the same AI image generation tools, but what's really kind of cool about this, and in the collaborative sense of me kind of sharing this with you and working with my client to kind of work on the referencing and kind of getting the ideation, that's all good. But when it comes time to actually producing a sketch, right? Once we've kind of locked in what the idea is and we like the bat, we don't like the bat, we like the gingerbread man, we like this pose, we like this kind of color reference, all that's like locked in. Now let's go to town and start drawing this. What you can do is if I jump into Photoshop, I've actually got this image that I kind of sketched up previously that we'll look at in tomorrow's episode and kind of finish off. I've actually brought this in as a PSD file into my board here, right? So this is a Photoshop file, and I can just drag and drop it into this. So it'll take a little sec to upload, because what it's doing is it's uploading this to the Creative Cloud. And working at it from there. So I'm going to close this now, and I'm going to go back into my board and wait for this to kind of finish uploading. So you can see it's a kind of a low res version of it right now because it's still kind of uploading a little bit. But there we go. We got the full res. What's really nice with this is I can click on this options, the three little dots here, and I can do copy, I can bring to front. I've got a whole bunch of board options. The one that I'm really looking for is this one, open in Photoshop. So this will open a version, Creative Cloud version of this in my desktop Photoshop that I can make edits to. And once I hit save, it'll update in my board. So this is, again, really cool for me to work with my client, looking at, like, rather than me sending them screenshots and having to dress them up and put them in a nice PDF and type in an email and all this kind of stuff that takes a little bit of time. It always kind of, you know, acts this way. I can just keep everything live in here and just update it there, and they can just go back to check my progress on it. It's also a really nice thing to look at in terms of like the history of a project. Like often, you know, when I'm working via email with a client, it'll take a little while to kind of like, sometimes I get up to like 70, 80, 90 emails in an email chain working on something with the client because there's rounds of changes that come through and all this kind of stuff. And then, you know, at some point the client goes like, oh, well, you know, can we go back to version 3B from like 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
I got to sift back through all those emails and change and go and find that. Whereas if I do that here, I've got all those versions ready to go in that board, and we can just kind of refer to them, and the client can just put a note on that. Yeah. So I'm going to save this. You'll notice, you probably can't see it up here. It's not a PSD file. It's a PSDC, which is Photoshop Document Cloud. Right? So this is now saving to the cloud. So the original on my desktop should not be affected by this. So it's nice to kind of have that extra version of that on my desktop for backup in case the client deletes something or whatever, or I delete something. It's not always the client's fault. Let's be fair. But I've got this update button that pops up because I've made a change to this saved file. It'll take a second to update, especially because we're live. And there we go. That change has now appeared in my board live for my client to see. So again, like really kind of nice to see this happening live with a client. Like I could be on a phone call, like a video call with my client, like I am with you now, and make these edits, and you can make the edits and I can make those changes. So it's actually a really powerful mood board tool for coming up with concepts, but it's actually also something that I am now going to incorporate into my creative process working with a client that will basically replace all my emails and all the PDFs that I have to do and all the slide decks and concept stages and keeping those on record and everything. Everything is here. Everything is here. It's live, it's editable, it's changeable. We can go back to basically go back to the drawing board, you know, like.
Yeah, well, you never have to
right
leave the
here.
drawing board.
Yeah.
Never leave the drawing board.
Um,
There you go. We've got a tagline for for Firefly Boards.
and so we'll come back to this after tomorrow's stream, but something else that's really quite cool with this is I can take this design, and we'll do this with tomorrow's design and pop it back into here if we can. I can take this image that I created, I've removed the background,
Yeah.
and then on here, I've just said, place image on a yellow t-shirt using, in this case, I'm using Flux Context Pro, which has done a slightly better job than Firefly potentially, but again, you can mess around with the agent, the engines, the models. This one, I've just said same thing. Load the prompt, mock this image up onto a model wearing a white t-shirt instead of just a white t-shirt. And then with this one, I've just added in change camera angle, 3/4 side view, change lighting to neon pink and blue. And then we've got a nice mock-up of what that would look like on a t-shirt ready to go from just this artwork that I uploaded as a flat JPEG.
Yeah, it's pretty
So
cool.
again, like really powerful for a client to be able to kind of see like, what's this going to look like in the end, right? When I kind of print this all together, this is what it's, so you could take a sketch and just kind of do it roughly like that, mock it up really professionally. Yeah. So lots and lots of really cool options in here to kind of explore. I haven't like looked at everything in the stream, and nor have I looked at everything myself. There's a lot of different things that we can kind of do. There we go, to remove the background. I didn't really want that to happen, but yeah.
Yeah. It's
really, really kind of like super cool tool, I think, for that. And it's not for like generating AI images and things. It's like, hey, look what I made. This is much more of a collaborative thing. It's much more of a process thing that allows me to streamline that process in a really interesting way.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and I think just the combination of different things. I think most creative people are visual people as well, and that can really help, particularly when you're working with. We've been talking about working with a client, but of course you can just collaborate as well. Like this is something that that we could do with streams, or we could do with just coming up with projects. It's something that you could do with friends or partners with things as well. Like, hey, we're going to do like a going away invitation, or maybe you're doing your wedding invite and you want to work with your, bridesmaids or people that you're invited, or your family or something like that. You know, there's all sorts of different kind of collaborative ways, and just the ease of use as well. Like you don't have to get them to sign in to like do all this sort of stuff. They don't have to necessarily pay for credits or anything. They can kind of just jump in and annotate and talk about things. And also, the version control thing, I think, is something that maybe we're showing our age here a little bit, Jeremy, but like version control, just not having to worry about that from the beginning to the end of a project, but having everything just in one place. Like, and you can bookmark the link, you could save the link, you could drag it onto your desktop, like whatever, however you work with like just saving links is like, it's just going to work. So I think it's a really interesting use case. I'm loving these illustrations as well. Do you want to kind of segue that into what we're doing tomorrow, maybe?
So tomorrow's stream, we'll be looking at kind of applying this onto a t-shirt using vector brushes and vector layers in Fresco.
Yeah, cool.
So this isn't new, but it's something that is kind of new in my personal process.
Yeah.
Getting into Fresco, kind of looking at that. So we'll look at doing this with a specific brief in mind, this kind of like horror, kind of gingerbread man, Christmas kind of thing of like, like beginning of November and all the shops are playing Christmas music and Christmas decorations. And you're like, already? Come on. It's like 2 months away. So I'm doing a little bit of a kind of like the horror of Christmas kind of returns kind of vibe, just as a bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing. So I've got these sketches that we're doing, and we will be putting those onto a t-shirt. We'll be talking about different tools and different options in Fresco that will allow you to do screen printing and set up a file in a much cleaner and smoother way than what I would have done in the past using Adobe Illustrator, basically.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's really cool. And just a reminder, there's 36 days until Christmas, so it's not that far away. But I love the merging of the end of Halloween and Christmas. I saw someone, and I love this idea because I had this idea ages ago, and they had a skeleton, a skull, hanging out the front of there that they'd made custom. And then for Halloween they turned it around, and on the other side was Santa. So rather than taking their big
Just
decorations
turn it
down,
around.
they're just recycling them. Yeah. And I was like,
Perfect.
they had like red LED lights just throughout Halloween, and then they switched on the Christmas lights. Just why not? Make it easier for yourself. But that was
Totally.
I thought that was really smart and clever. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. Thanks for taking us through Firefly Boards. Like, the more I see it, the more I like really enjoy the kind of process. I'm looking forward to more features in Firefly Boards as well, like annotation, like more annotational stuff. It'd be really cool to be able to like have a stylus and kind of draw in there as well. I'm looking forward to that. I'm not saying that there's anything like that coming. There may not be, but I can't really see how it couldn't have that sort of thing. Just as a collaborative tool, it seems to grow kind of as we keep going. And it's web-based, so you should be able to open it on an iPad or something like that, right? Maybe something like that in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
But super cool. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Thank you for everyone watching live and watching on demand. We'll be back tomorrow with another live stream with Jeremy Lord. Hope you guys can join us there. But thanks again, Jeremy.
Thanks so much.
See you guys.
See you
next time. Bye-bye.